And I'm here with Eduardo Asunsolo again, and there's some updates in the Keith Raniere case that we wanted to talk about. I'll let Eduardo take it because I've got some ideas, but I might state them wrong. So go ahead, Eduardo. Give us the update. What's going on?
Thank you. You're saying my name right now. That's awesome. Not a lot of people do it, even people who hang out with me for years. On the contrary, I become Eduardo and then Ed. I think it's gonna end up being Eh.
You'll end up
So
being Ed Smith.
yeah, hope like an American, my wife's last name. Anyway,
Asunsolo.
yeah, that's good, and it's with the accent. The U has an accent, which signifies that's where you put the intonation. So the update is that we filed pro se. I delivered to the court a thick document of a few hundred pages with exhibits and a Rule 33 motion pro se by Keith um, at 11:30 p.m. on the Dropbox of the court, where a lot of the wrongdoings are recorded, documented historically. So it's going to be sort of what actually happened versus what the salacious narrative and the government narrative was.
Yep.
It will explain what actually happened and those loopholes that make no sense to people who understand legality or who went to the trial. Those loopholes will make sense. So
So 11:30. First, I got to ask about that. So 11:30. Why so late? Why not during business hours?
Well, there's a lot of work to do. There's still a lot of stuff that didn't make it in. We've successfully put together a way of creating a motion, a legal document for someone that has a very complex case in a very effective manner with the help of lawyers. And we wanted to use every hour. I mean, there's been people. Sunil has been up, literally sometimes up all night typing, and there's a lot of people working on it with him, for him. So we wanted to use every single hour, and we were pretty careful. We went and talked to the officer that stays at night on the court, and I told him I would go in a few hours and what was going on, and we had the printing um, company ready and all of that. So it was wanting to use as many hours as possible so that as many issues as possible could make it in.
Okay, and then it was filed pro se. So for those not in the know, that means it was filed without the aid of attorney. So this is uh, make justice blind
This
as
is Keith,
acting as agent.
being a citizen, doing it pro se. And yeah,
Okay.
Sunil, his power of attorney, who happens to, have a team, are helping him, which, I keep thinking maybe this is the blueprint for what we do. Imagine when we win, what it would mean for the legal system where you can have an independent organization that comes and helps you do a better case. I hope we win because of many reasons, but for that one too. Um, so that's the update, and I think that the reason for Tully to not be in it, and he's still the leader of the team, and there's many things happening, but the motion contains so many things that in order to understand the veracity of it, you needed to be part of the community, to be, since this started 3 years ago, even the trial. And
Yep.
so Sunil and myself were able to be at the trial. We know Keith, we know the witnesses, or at least I do. And for a lawyer to understand all the stuff and for someone with Tully who has such a high standard, be able to really say that everything is there. He didn't want to do that, and he that speaks of his high standard. And we wanted to make sure that all the issues made it in. So Keith decided to do it per se, to do it before the deadline, and not risk losing any of his rights. So
So much like the Depp trial, you have a bunch of people who are watching it who have a bunch of background information that perhaps an attorney can't bring themselves up to speed on to the level that they might prefer to.
yeah, even the fact that Frank Parlato, someone who is an enemy of Keith, this is not opinion in that he has written about 5,000 articles, like posts against Keith or explaining Nexium. And, this is someone that the New York Times article cited as, he was the source. And it's in HBO. He was like sort of the person who helped put Keith in the hands of prosecutors. And this person, saw the process and was like, this is, I don't like Keith, but this is worse. This is awful the way the process went. And I think it's a pretty awesome thing that someone who doesn't like you stands with you in an injustice. I think it speaks wonders of Frank's character also.
Well, and this is, I've heard this before, which is Keith wasn't convicted of breaking the law. He was convicted of social repugnance,
Right.
and that there's something about that ought to be terrifying and ought to be a line in the sand where people say, no, I may or may not like that person, but they are entitled to due process.
That is correct. And that's what I wanted to talk about today. I don't think people understand to a deep level. We don't get what it is innocence and guilt versus due process. It's I had an interesting experience on immigration law, and my dad is a lawyer, but my passion of law here in New York started translating for the court a little bit and immigration, political asylum offices, and it was so interesting. Like sometimes, let's say a woman who had a lot of suffering, had been in America, would come and make a case, and really like the judge liked her.
Yep.
And sometimes he would state, a judge stated once, he was like, well, it sounds like you've suffered enough. And it's almost heroic from a movie. Bam. And she goes and stays in the country, and it's perceived as good. And I remember having a feeling, yeah, she's a good woman, it's great that she's staying, but was that due process?
Right.
And I like that example
Treatment,
because,
equal treatment under the law.
right. And then, soon enough, I saw the other side. If the judge didn't like someone, it was more difficult to get due process. And so I understood that in a subtle way, like in Mexico, there's not really due process yet here. And then the Nexium trial happened, and you know it's that on steroids. So the a lot of people, I think, my hypothesis is they don't get that, and that we as Americans agree with it. My thought is that a lot of people actually believe that, yeah, it's okay, if the guy is bad, if he's Hitler on the stand, whatever, if you planted the robbery, convict him. He's Hitler. Look at what he did, 6 million Jews, imagine.
Well,
But
and what's been happening in discourse and our perception over the course of is everyone I don't like is Hitler.
that is precisely the point. You
Yeah.
know, the you don't know if you vote for this system where the media can make you into the devil, and or if you believe enough that because what the media says, somebody is the devil, and it's okay to convict him. If you vote for that, you vote for a system that you don't understand. That might happen to you. You might think that they're all being honest, the media and the prosecutors and stuff, but it's just not like that. So you're voting for something that might happen to you later. How can you trust that there's no process in America where if someone is, dangerous enough, hated enough, you can dress him like the devil and then take him to court and put him in jail? So the importance of due process is so that we don't. That's one of the aspects what you were describing. With if there's due process, something like that, assassinating someone's character and trying to take him unfairly into jail, that would pop up. With a good due process system, that wouldn't be allowed. That would stick out. So that's what we need to have. And in this case, it's an interesting social test, if you want, um, because they're giving you someone that undeniably, the media has made Keith into the most horrible person. What happened on the tabloids, it's so far from anything that even made it into the court, and people don't care. He's just bad. So you have someone who's according to the media, clearly bad. And then you have also clear tampering by the FBI, clear corruption by the prosecution, clear bias, at least, if not collusion by the court, the judge. You have, historic, world record breaking bad due process versus just historically someone hated in the media. And what are people going to choose is the question. And I think what you're saying is important. If we don't choose due process, everything else fails from that. You're assuming this system where we're moral and we're ethical, and when we see someone who's objectively like there's someone who's bad, we are going to be fair and we're going to cheat just that one time because he's Hitler. That's not true. We that wouldn't be just either. But even if there was that opportunity, it would be horrible. So this is an issue that I wanted to
Yeah,
bring up.
it's a chain. It's a giant system, and due process. It's only as strong as the weakest link in that chain.
Yes. And so that is there's that quote on the podcast, on the recordings, by Keith, that at the end he says, well, yes, if you break all the laws to go after the devil, do you really think, I don't remember the exact phrase, but it says something like, do you think you'll be able to stand straight on the winds that will blow then? When, if there's no laws to protect you anymore, what do you do when the devil turns around on you? You broke all the laws to go after the devil, and then the devil turns around on you and says, hey, how are you? And all the laws are broken. I love that analogy because, if you use hate to convict someone, ultimately hate wins and there will be more hate in the court system in society. So,
Well, in the foundation of really the fabric of our society, the thing that makes us different than other places is the fact that we're all given equal treatment and that we all have redress to the government. If you don't have redress to the government and you don't have uh, uh, there's a movement. There's a movement that's been going on since 2020, which is we need to bring everyone we disagree with to justice. Okay, great. And by justice, I mean they should all be in prison forever.
right.
And the red church is doing it, and the blue church is doing it. Is I disagree with this group of people or that group of people, and they should all be held to account. And again, by held to account means they should all be in prison. Well, that's going to be a dangerous world we live in, because it means that anybody who's in ultimately anyone who's in conflict with the government or the mob is going to be in prison, and that the chain of justice is only as strong as that weakest link. And I feel like with Keith and the cancellation of Marilyn Manson, the cancellation of R. Kelly, even the cancellation of Johnny Depp, all of these things look like really scary signs. We see in the United States a big movement toward, we need to do something about due process for Black people. Awesome. Love it. Anything we can do to help due process is great. But we watch these really high profile, even wealthy men with education get shot down in front of us. And the court of public opinion needs to be separated from the court of law.
Yeah. So, I mean, I agree with you. And Cosby is interesting, even though he's black, his status of it's different. And so he was treated, I think, pretty um, widely, but at least by the media, because he has also like the famous, I don't know, it's strange, but I agree with you. This is one of the things of Keith's case is that he doesn't have that much support by a nonprofit, and let's say all this BLM and like that, that doesn't touch Keith, and on the contrary, it's almost like um, a good thing, showing that not only black people go to jail, but it's awful. It actually causes more people to go to jail. If with Keith, they did all this stuff. They created dates on the photographs. They did all sorts of like violations at trial. The prosecutors. This is with man that like every news outlet is covering this. You have blogs, people writing books, all sorts of stuff. It's like on the eye of the public, and you cheated so much. Imagine what they're doing when no one's looking. Imagine what they do to black people, to Mexicans like myself. You don't think they're cheating there? They cheated here like in broad daylight. So it's very interesting, and that is the point that I wanted to make. People need to let go of the fact that Keith is guilty to them. In some ways, I have to let go of the fact that he is innocent to me, and he is innocent to me. And unfortunately, I'm in a position where I know the witnesses, I know the people, they invited me, the people who brought the character assassination campaign, the defamation. I was in the middle of the whole thing, so I have a perspective that is of innocence, that it's very unique. But I have to let go of that. In some ways, this is not about Keith being innocent or guilty. This is when the FBI plants evidence on one of their citizens, it doesn't matter what happened at trial. That is the only focus we should have.
Well, and the differentiation that I like to make is let's forget about guilt and innocence and focus on whether he is guilty or not guilty, because we should presume that the government is guilty all the time, and we should
Right.
presume that the citizens are not guilty. We should presume that they're innocent, and the government has to prove that they are guilty. And if they have to resort to breaking rules or planting evidence, or in this case, generating evidence, then he is not guilty. He has not been proven guilty or given due process. And that's the thing, that whether or not you like Keith's ethics, or whether or not you like his lifestyle, or whether or not you like he may not be innocent to you, but that is distinct from whether he's guilty or not guilty.
Yeah. So, in some ways, I want to not discuss as much the non-guilt or the guilt of Keith when it comes to what's happening now. What's happening now is we, the people, have investigated the investigators, and we want to prosecute them and prosecute the prosecutors. We, the people, caught them planting evidence, and all this collusion, corruption that went on, we caught them, and we're processing that. We are making that bad good. We're making it right. We're fixing it. That is what's going on. People keep distracting with this notion of we are, I'm some sort of an idiot, and I'm brainwashed, and I'm like, with this big pitchfork saying, Keith is innocent, I took a Kool-Aid. That is not what's happening. Even if he's guilty, what I'm saying is, we the people, citizens, you guys, this is your job. When you have evidence that they cheated on you, your government, you go after your government, and when I mean after your government, I mean in a legal battle. Because this is what's been going on, with the media. Some of the things I've tweeted, they're like, oh, Eduardo and Keith and Sunil on the phone, they're at war with the government. When we said war, we mean, the context needs to be there. The context is this government narrative, these fake things, these lies they knew were lies, and all the opposition created total destruction of our community, of all of our companies. They put innocent people in jail, and we found the tampering, and we're fighting back. We're talking about a legal battle. So war with the government, and this is, and I say it like that because that is what needs to happen. Once you have evidence, ones and zeros that your government is involved in like corruption to the highest levels, you
Yep.
forget about what happened at trial and you go and you fix that.
So I do want to speak to that article real quick, because I actually came across that same, oh my God, they said they were at war with the government. And the first thing I thought was, well, okay, obviously that's a metaphor. But the second thing I thought was like, well, who started that war? because
Yeah, it's
because I
been
don't
a
think because
it's been a slaughter
I
so
don't think
far.
Keith started out going, hey, you know what? I'm going to file a sortie at the fly a sortie at the U.S. government because
Right.
that seems like a good idea. Like he's a smart guy with a lot of resources, but I don't think he's that smart to where he thinks he's going to actually take over the government. That seems to be a
No, and
recurring.
and there's ample proof. Before the feds entered the first time to our community, to our companies, there had been no incident reported to any sort of level of violence of, everything was great. Never had an incident, bunch of civil lawsuits like companies have and things like that of ex affiliates, but an incident of something like even someone yelling or someone or slapping them, we didn't even know where the like police station was. This is like a vegetarian type of company. So yeah, the war thing. That's the other thing, though. Think of it objectively. They have hundreds, maybe thousands of hours of Sunil and Keith talking. Why pick just that word? We are at war with the government of millions, literally words.
Well, you and I both know why they did that. They did that
But
because
anyone with
they knew that they could get it. And there's another thing that I want to interject, and then you can come back to that if you want, which is uh, whether or not you or Sunil or Nikki or anybody are all brainwashed, even that doesn't matter. The
fine.
government shouldn't be, even if that were
Right.
true,
And
it
this is
shouldn't
what I keep
matter.
telling people. What happens on Twitter is they don't want to read the Kuiper report and the Rule 33, and they say it because you're gaslighting me, because it's full of lies, because I don't have time, because the court decides, not me. You're going and saying that I'm brainwashed and that I'm an idiot, and I'm saying to you, okay, call me brainwashed and an idiot, but please read my evidence. And they're denying that and not wanting to read it. So what happens is, they have this conception of Keith is guilty, and subconsciously they're saying, someone who's guilty enough, they cheated a little bit on him, okay, he should go to jail anyway. That is very wrongful, and they're not brave enough to first see it and then say it, but they're operating as with that belief. And I think that's something that probably most people have going on. Think of something as simple as, somebody hurts a child of yours or a loved one of yours, and then you're in this awful tragedy, this awful situation, and then you learn they cheated a little bit to put them in jail, but you saw them, let's say, hurt your child. Would you really stand for his due process? In your gut, my feeling is no, I wouldn't do that. And I believe that most people have that feeling, and they people should bring that feeling to the surface and be like, okay, it's tough. If something happened to a loved one and I was between due process and sending him to jail, I would probably send him to jail. But that is the beginning of that question, because if
Well,
you allow
and one of
yourself
the
to admit that, you might be able to understand why it's more important to consider due process even when something personal is at stake.
things that's different than say Johnny Depp, Keith Raniere and everybody else is Johnny Depp is beloved by millions, so they're willing to take a look at at
Right.
the evidence and find out and be okay with saying, hey, this system was corrupted. With
Right.
so one of the things that you're facing, it's a very real challenge with Keith Raniere
There's not a
is,
lot of people like him.
well, it's even whether or not people like him is, uh, if all of your evidence is true, it's if they look at it, they're going to be set with this realization that the system they
Yes.
rely on to handle these questions is deeply corrupted.
Thank you. And that is my next point. I know it's difficult. I had a disappointment, this enlightenment of the justice system during 6 weeks of trial, where I was like, oh my God, it's all corrupt, like in Mexico, but worse because it's perfectly staged. So I was heartbroken, and I had a 3-month-old baby by the time. As an immigrant, people come here. and they're like, yes, I'll find, it's horrible to grow up where there's no justice, and we come here with the illusion of it, of justice, and nada.
I've known a great number of immigrants here in the Twin Cities, and just genuinely fantastic people, among the most patriotic that I've ever met.
It makes sense. The thing is, we understand. For example, I can't let go of this because I understand what it is like to grow up where there's no justice. And in some ways, some people don't understand what that's like. And if you allow for this case to go the way it went, we're going to set up a standard. Imagine, we have scientific proof that the FBI planted child porn. If this becomes the standard of what the FBI can do on their citizens, what's next?
Well, and not only did they plan it, they created it. It
They
wasn't
created it.
It wasn't child porn. It became child porn
Right.
when they did their
So that's a
when
better
they changed
question,
the
even.
data.
If the FBI can create and plant evidence and convict you, what's next? What's the standard? What can't they do?
I'll tell you this. So this is a weird legal argument, and for any attorneys who watch this, recognize that this is a weird legal argument. So these are 22. We're talking about 22 photos. These 22 photos were found on a hard drive, and they had metadata on them that demonstrated that they were of an adult woman because of the time that they were taken. The evidence, the dates were then changed to make her appear as if she were a minor.
Yeah,
That
and
was
right there, if something can't be distinguished from child porn, then it is creating child porn. So that step you just described
well, and
constitutes
here's the
creating it.
thing is this has been decided then in a court of law. This is my weird
Right.
argument that I'm hoping to run past a couple of attorneys and get, because they're going to say that's stupid, but I don't care. I still think it's interesting. Is the agents who changed the X data on this evidence that was determined in court to be child porn, they created child porn, they were in possession of child porn, and
And then
they
distributed it.
distributed child porn.
Correct.
Right? So like, okay, if that's what we're doing, like that might be an angle for offensive. Like I said, I know there are going to be pushbacks to that there's going to be pushback to that argument. But
Absolutely.
I'd be very interested to see what that pushback is, because they created it. It wasn't child porn until they changed the dates.
So, right before, I agree with you. I think it's the most awful, ridiculous thing. And it will be pursued like to the highest extent, of the fullest extent of the law. I want to call for people to unite and prosecute this and call for justice on what our government did on us. I want to invite people like myself to forget about the innocence of Keith, and for people that are against me to forget for a second of the guilt of Keith. Innocence or guilt of Keith is not as important as the government cheated on us. There's government corruption, collusion to the highest levels. Let's unite. Let's move away from innocence or guilt or non-guilt of Keith, into government corruption together. That's what I would love if that could happen. If we could move away from innocence or guilt of Keith into government corruption together.
Well, and this motion that was filed, this Rule 33, it's a Rule 33 motion. Am I saying that correctly?
Correct.
Okay, so that was filed. Is this isn't to say, hey, overturn the conviction. It's to say, let's have an open hearing or a
Right.
retrial. Is that
People
right?
say, correct. People in Twitter say I'm lying. What I'm saying is I'm calling for an evidentiary hearing.
Yep.
I'm putting myself, put me on the stand, put every evidence I've said on the table.
Yep, let's test it and see if
Vet
I'm
it,
lying.
test it, say that I'm lying, actually. Come, let's have an evidentiary hearing, and let's let the world watch it too. That's what I'm saying.
Well, and at this point, it's the legal system is always adversarial, but at this point, it's adversarial to your position, which is ideal, right? Because it's like excellent.
Right.
Then if that's the case, if they're adversarial to your position, then let them respond to your motion with, yeah, we're going to show that you're wrong and that we're right.
Right. So let's show it. Especially
So
if they say, it's like this slam dunk. Can you? I need, in order to send the link that I have, I need to go back on my email to send it to Mark because he doesn't have it.
yep.
So is that, or is there another way? Maybe you can send it to him
Let
if
me
you
do
want.
this. I'll send it to him right now. Give me
Do you
one
have his
second.
email?
To anybody, if we decide to post this, I think I do. Let's see. If anybody is watching this, thanks for your patience. If not, we'll edit around it. But give me a second. I think I do have Mark's email here. Is he standing
I think
by?
it's mark@markelliott.com.
Yeah. No, I have him in my thing because we talked about Tourette's. Give me a second. Link. If we post this in whole, anybody watching now can just look at Eduardo's handsome face. Or my strong jaw, because I was looking over there. Like, what's my good side? So yeah, I do think we have a pretty reasonable segment there. We will probably edit this out.
Yeah, I like those 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah, and I think that's we'll have a set of sections for that. We might as well just edit this, so we'll just keep going until we'll just keep talking behind the scenes here while we're waiting for
Okay.
him. But yeah, I think if we do 10-minute segments like that, I have a series. Basically, here's a process that we could do is you and I have the 10-minute segment. I'll think about the graphics I'll think about, like, what would you need to know if you were to step into this right now? Right? Sort of like a serial movie. Are you familiar with those? Like they used to have in the old cinemas. You sort of step in. You've seen Star Wars.
Yes.
The original Star Wars movie is the 4th episode, and the whole point of it is you're supposed to step in without knowing what happened before. But in the old serial movies, what they would have is they would have on last week's episode, there was this, and you'd get just a quick second, and this is where it ended. And then you'd have this week's episode, and then coming next week, right? So I think I can do those in animated spots or graphics.
That would be great.
So it's like, oh, this is what we're getting. This is where we were before. This is where we were before. This is what you need to know to understand what we're talking about. And you and I can kind of talk through this. We can sort of talk through what's new right now because we have a bunch of the backstory, but then I'll put the key parts of the backstory in an animation or a voiceover in the beginning. I think that's probably
Mark says that he hasn't got the email.
Give me a second here. Let me make sure I sent it.
I can do. I mean, if I
yeah, you can drop off your phone. I sent it to Mark at Mark Elliott.
Let me see.
Yep. There he is. Did you get it?
Yes, he has it.
I was going to say this. I hate to keep spending your money, but there is a thing that I might consider doing if you're going to use a phone camera, and that's not. Are you an iOS user or Android?
Android.
I might consider just getting an old Android, $100 Android or something that's just a dedicated camera.
We have the same.
So that way it's there, and you can use your phone if you need to while we're doing production, or if you don't, you won't be interrupted by a call or whatever, and you'll have a stable system. So I have dozens of phones around that we use for video production, for when we need extra cameras. Like I said, I hate to keep spending your money.
No, I think it's good. I mean, I think that, I have an old phone. The only problem is that the camera is not as good as this one. I guess it's good enough.
How old is this phone?
Like 2 years.
So this is what I do. This is both Val and I have this method. What we do is we upgrade our phones whenever we need a dedicated phone somewhere. We just take we just dedicate that phone and then upgrade to a new one. Just you may or may not do that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I might. Who knows? Maybe I should get an iPhone.
Are you a Mac user? You're not a Mac user.
No.
And you're already used to.
Yeah, I tried to change to iPhone like 11, and I couldn't.
I'll tell you what. It's. I don't encourage anybody to get into the Apple ecosphere unless there's some business requirement that they need to. And I say that as a very heavy Apple user. I don't think but I'm platform agnostic, but I'm a heavy Apple user because I do so much media production. And if you don't need to, I wouldn't stay doing it. Mark, how are you doing?
I haven't heard that term before. You are a platform agnostic. I like that.
It's a thing that I think it's part of my technical ethos, and it's one that I think is valuable for people to consider. We're not recording right now. I mean, we are recording, but this is all going to be edited out. So we've got a second to just chat. And
sounds great. Nice to see you.
It's great to see you. How are you doing? It looks like you've got a talk coming up next week.
I've got a talk coming up. So thanks for letting me just talk about it for a little bit. And Eduardo, thanks for asking me again. Yeah. I thought this was a great opportunity to promote as much as I can.
So here's what we'll do, because I'm only going to be able to do limited editing before I head on the road. Is we're going to start out with you talking about your talk that's coming up. So that way we'll have a section that we can just go straight to. And then Eduardo can start we can get your people to start promoting that using the video and your image to start promoting it. So we'll start out with
let me send you. Do you have the poster?
I don't. You can say, yeah, since we're offline, go ahead and send me the poster right now.
Should I you have it on your texts. I don't know if that.
I have it on my phone. I'll need it on my computer. Go ahead and just send it back to Jewel Eldora.
I have that. Yep. One sec.
And then we'll see if I can upload it to StreamYard.
Okay, just sent it.
Give me a second here.
Morning, Eduardo.
Good morning, Mark.
You look sharp.
Yeah, sharp.
Where are you, by the way? Where do you? I seem to remember you're from.
I'm originally from St. Louis. But just like right now, I happen to be in Arizona.
Okay. I just as a random happenstance, there's a non-zero chance I might be in Phoenix this week. Driving through. So are you somewhere else?
I'm in Tucson.
You're in Tucson. My mom lives in Tucson.
Oh, wow. Shit.
Yeah.
Supposedly the nickname is the Dirty T.
Is it?
Well, because of the trash. There's a lot of trash in different parts, particularly on the streets. But it's been great. I definitely enjoy it out here.
And you get some rain every year, like all at once, like monsoons or something like that.
It is the monsoon season now. It's just beginning.
Yeah. Give me a second. Let me add this here. Where do I add this? Down at the bottom. Sorry, it's been a couple of weeks since I've worked in StreamYard. Let's see if I can add this here. Who's next? Is that what it's called?
Who's next? Yep.
All right, let's see if it uploads. All right, so that's going to go over there. Give me a second. Let me see if I can get a better layout. So StreamYard is not a, it's not sort of like a full suite of, give me a second. Let me see if I do this and put you in here. It's not, it doesn't give the full functionality that you would have from some other platforms, but it's so easy to use that I can't shift this around.
Do you ever use OBS?
Yeah, I'm super versed in OBS. Kind of the StreamYard has some advantages over OBS.
I just asked because the few things that I've done, I've used OBS. It's crazy how they make it so idiot proof for someone that has no experience to start. It's pretty wild.
Even the fact that OBS exists is amazing. But it's like sort of like you guys are both old enough to remember MySpace.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So kind of the thing with MySpace was they gave you access to, they gave the average user access to the HTML and they could make their own layout. And what they ended up with was a really ugly site because not everybody who can change HTML is a designer. So OBS gives the ability for people to make something that doesn't, if I hand it to an average user. And so because we use StreamYard, it's because it's even more idiot proof. But it does limit kind of my ability to, let's see if this one works. It doesn't give me all of the bells and whistles that I might have otherwise. And one of the things that it sucks with is specifically this. Hang on. I just want to see if I can find a layout that's got the who's next. Who shot these photos, by the way? I've seen a couple of photos from you from this same series. And it's like Dynamite and
no, it was either from my friend's iPhone. And
really?
We did it in St. Louis.
Okay.
I think. I mean, I know where it was, but I think it was his iPhone.
And what was the lighting scenario?
I was on like a 22nd floor.
Okay.
I was on it was all, it was like an office building and it had all open windows and I was behind on some wood, like wood paneling.
Okay, so they're just whatever, because it's usually if I notice the light, it's awesome. Because I'm not super good at that, but it's like that photos from the series are dynamite.
Joe, maybe you could help me with my in-home studio lighting. It's I have like many windows and different lighting sources, and then I kind of come out. It doesn't look like your guys. I have a lot of natural light and not important right now, but
so no, it's this is meaningful stuff, especially early on, because I'm hoping that all of us will be having recurring stuff. I will put together kind of ideally. So I'm a bad example here. Ideally, you'd have no natural light in your video studio. Now that's not going to work for Eduardo. But ideally, you'd have no natural light because you run into situations where you can't control the sun at a certain time of day.
Yeah, no, the sun is very strong here.
Yeah, and so ideally that I noticed you've sort of fixed your background a little bit.
Yeah.
There was a key wrinkle in it before. You could see it now. Depending upon like what you're doing is fine, and you've also got a new mic. Is that a new mic?
It just wasn't in. I don't think it was in the shot before.
Okay, what do you use? You use a Blue
Yeti.
Yep, I think those things are astonishingly good for as point and shoot as they are. I'm probably going to end up having one for my to-go rig, and they're like what, $150. So it's
I think so. Yeah, it wasn't crazy.
So yeah, your stuff looks good every time you come through, but there are best practices that I'll probably send information out to as we progress. But so the first thing we want to talk about is the this talk that you have. You can kind of give a brief pitch for what that is, why it's important, whatever, and then we can break it out a little bit longer, but we'll get that out as a segment.
Perfect.
I'm not going to use this because I can't seem to. Let me give it one more shot here at seeing if I can make this. OBS would give me way better controls on this, but it's not what I'm using for the most part.
No, it's not that I know OBS is. I just was curious if you've used it. It was
Yeah. There's another. Val and I, my business partner, we used to run the Minneapolis television network, and we did tons and tons of different R&D with different ones. And OBS is a certain kind of rocket sauce for sure. Let me do this, and what if I do this layout? There we go. I'm going to start out with this, and then I will switch to that puts. There we go. That'll put you up there. All right. Let's start out here. And we've got Mark Elliott on with us now. Thanks for joining us, Mark. It sounds like you've got a talk coming up. Why don't you give us the details on that?
Great, Troy. Thanks for having me back. Hey there, Eduardo. So next Wednesday at noon, I'm going to be putting on a presentation called "Who's Next: The Rise of Character Assassination and Loss of Human Decency."
And that's Wednesday the 29th?
Wednesday the 29th in Chelsea. And for me, this is it's really coming full circle, as I promoted this presentation 3 years ago, actually, almost 3 years to the date, June 26th, right near the end of the Keith Raniere's trial. It was actually after I started promoting it at the end, and then it was going to be a few weeks, ended up being a few weeks after. And in just promoting it, and it's a presentation ultimately about, what we're doing to each other, the power of words, and how we control people's reputation with what we do and say. And by simply promoting that presentation, one of the federal prosecutors, Moira Kimpenza, she had called my lawyer at the time and basically threatened that I would be indicted if I went through with the presentation.
Wait, what? So you're not under indictment at that time?
Well, not only was I not under indictment, the trial was over. But I, as you know, you've talked extensively with Eduardo about the media, the prosecution, and people against us. There was a very strong narrative against us, basically around the world, and they were doing whatever they could to silence and suppress anything that could counter the narrative that NXIVM or Keith Raniere, anything associated with it, was not good. Because, my story about beating Tourette syndrome with NXIVM, helping other people beat Tourette's, is completely antithetical that we hurt people, that NXIVM is an organization that destroys people.
Well, and it sounds like that narrative became sort of a sacred groupthink belief system, and it doesn't hold up to counter evidence.
It doesn't hold up to counter evidence. And if you have any person that's willing to have a 2-minute conversation, it doesn't hold that much water very quickly. And again, my experience with the Tourette's, as we talked about before, it's not unique per se in what people experience in NXIVM. It's just a very palpable example. And I think that's why I was threatened. They just don't want anyone to imagine anything other than NXIVM, Keith Raniere. Everything is just horrible. As again, you've talked extensively with Eduardo, as it's coming out now that the FBI tampered. They had a very, very flimsy and thin case, and so they didn't want anything to challenge it. So, that happened about 3 years ago. And so I'm really excited to be able to come back out, put on the presentation, use my experience of beating Tourette's and with NXIVM, and show the power of what character assassination did to the Tourette's Project and other projects working with NXIVM. And then also just a solution of talking about, okay, what do you do when you have a problem with somebody? And looking at what if you're wrong? And then even in a worst case scenario, that when something horrible happened, how do you still want to conduct yourself in those circumstances? As right now we live in a world where it's, we're very mean and destructive to each other, not really thinking about the consequences of how we try to resolve differences.
So tell us a bit more about the talk and the details of where people can find out more about it, and maybe a link if you've got one.
Yeah. So the very specific details, it's going to be at, actually, I don't even have, I should have the address. So the link for it is markelliott.com. It's my name, marcelliot.com/who's next.
Okay.
And if you go to that link, it has the address in Chelsea, but it's going to be at 12 o'clock. It'll be a little bit over an hour. And for anyone that wants to stay, there also will be a Q&A.
That's awesome. Thanks. Okay. So we've got the event covered. That's great. What else do you want to talk? So obviously there was this motion that came out yesterday, that was submitted yesterday. How does what you're doing connect to that, and what are you going to talk about in the talk that relates to that, perhaps?
The presentation itself is not going to go into so much content about the criminal conduct surrounding the Raniere, the Raniere NXIVM case.
Sure.
But of course, it relates in the sense of I think at the very core, it's how do you want to treat thy neighbor? It's this fundamental question that we've been talking about since all of us were in kindergarten. When you have a conflict with somebody, how do you want to conduct yourself? Do you believe in ends justify the means, which is what we're seeing and what we've had for centuries, and we still have when you turn on the news, when you turn on Twitter. It is a dog eat dog world, and that is one way to resolve differences. The other way is you can come from a place of more compassion and love, which is, when you look at someone like Martin Luther King. The way that I think it relates directly to the NXIVM case is that it is clear that, okay, so there's a group of people that thought that there was a problem. Now, they could have gone about it in a very different way that didn't have to result in all this types of destruction, even if they thought something bad did happen. Although, myself, Eduardo, and the people that you've talked to, obviously we believe Keith Raniere is innocent, and no crimes were ultimately committed. But even if you believe that is true, how do you then want to pursue resolving that difference in the justice system? And clearly, they did not go about that in a way that was, from a good place, from a place of love. And ultimately, they went the opposite way and were very destructive, so much so that the FBI ended up planting child pornography on Keith Raniere to convict what I believe is an innocent man. So it relates more in terms of the general principle, even though I won't be talking necessarily about specific aspects of the FBI tampering.
So this is going to come out after that talk, and I'm assuming you're going to be giving it in other places, or is this a one-off event that you're thinking?
This is a one-off event, but I mean, I've been speaking for 15 years. The reality is because of what happened with the case, what the prosecution did, how vindictive they were, I was just scared to be completely transparent.
It sounds like there were a bunch of people who gathered around a narrative, and each one of them had a hammer, and Keith Raniere looked like the nail, and they all used their specific hammer to nail Keith Raniere.
I think they had AR-15s.
That might be. I was going to say a hammer didn't feel like it captures it, but AR-15 does.
When your only problem, when your only tool is an AR-15, all of your problems look like, I don't know. But yeah,
somebody was saying on Twitter, maybe Jesus wishes he had one. I know it's mean, but that's why I thought it was a perfect opportunity with what we were planning to talk about. I think if you step away from innocence versus guilt into due process, you would find what Mark is saying, that even if Keith is guilty, the way the prosecution, the agents, and the media went about it, it's not right. So
the other thing to think about, Troy, is let's say, here you think Keith Raniere next to him, all these things are horrible. If you look at the timeline of what happened, let's say that we got to trial and they would have found him, that the jury would have found him innocent. right then, just innocent right there.
Juries don't find people innocent. And this is a thing that it's like, I wish if there was one thing I could push out to the culture, it's this: juries do not find people innocent. The state fails to demonstrate to a jury that that person is guilty, and the jury finds someone not guilty. That's irrelevant and not even related to whether or not they're innocent. And I hate to point on that semantic, but it's a meaningful one.
Even with that, with what you're describing, if they find that he's not guilty of that, take that moment in time for a year and a half. This is a person that had no due process in the media. A whole company was destroyed. 17,000 people had taken this course, loved it. Their lives were just, so many people just scattered. Over 20 different companies were destroyed. What I'm saying is, at that point, even if he was found not guilty, everything, this man's life was already ruined.
100%. The accusation is the conviction.
Exactly. So that in itself is also what I'm speaking to. That is a problem. I'm sure Eduardo has said this in the many times that you've chatted. It's not that we don't believe in people being held accountable. It's not that we don't believe that nobody commits crimes. Of course that happens. And if I ever thought that there was a crime committed by Keith or NXIVM, I would want someone or the justice system to try to investigate that. The question is, how do we go about doing that? Do we do it so that somebody's life is destroyed in the process? Or could someone be investigated, and if they were found not guilty, their life should be exactly the same the moment before they were investigated?
Well, we're in the death throes of the mainstream media model, this sort of advertising-driven media. And they have had an extraordinary amount of power over the culture. And it seems to be merging into this new media, the social media environment, that is it's a substrate for a certain type of reputation and relationship destruction aggression model. And so it's the death throes of the old media that had a lot of power, who's doing everything they can to scramble to get clicks, combined with this new outrage platform that seems to be this combination. And as I think it was Eduardo had said, that Keith wasn't found guilty of any crimes. He was found guilty of social repugnance. And I feel like he's probably patient zero of a much bigger phenomena. And I think that's what you're speaking to in your talk.
I couldn't agree more. I think, I hope with the presentation, again, I have, because of just the way that of my story of living with Tourette's, overcoming it, helping other people, it's so palpable how good it is. Of when you hear it, it makes you feel good simply because of what it means for people with Tourette syndrome, what it means for the medical community. And then when you see the power of words online destroyed something that literally could alleviate pain for millions of people, hopefully that will bring people pause and make people think about the power that we hold in a Facebook post, in a tweet, on a commercial, on a newscast, to control other people's lives. I mean, at the end of the day, your reputation is single-handedly the most important thing in a civilized world, or sort of in a technologically advanced world, to put food on the table. And if somebody destroys that, it limits your ability to just even provide for yourself or your family. And all of us have that power, and we don't realize how powerful we are. And we need to be more mindful with respect to how we do that. And my story with respect to NXIVM and what happened to NXIVM is a perfect, incredible example of how something can be destroyed when you just slow down and look at the process of how it happened.
So I'm skeptical of the Tourette's claims, right? Which I think everybody should be skeptical of the Tourette's claims. And I believe everybody in NXIVM that I've talked to, they would all share that ethic of, yeah, wait until you can see some evidence of it. And so we're not making any claims about this other than anecdotally, we have seen this thing work in the field. You guys have seen this work in the field.
Luckily, you've got me sitting here for you to give you some of the anecdotal evidence.
Well, yeah, and that's actually so with an understanding that I'm expecting that anybody who hears this will be skeptical of it, especially the people who might be quick to dismiss it, because I'm interested in your theory, your method, and the outcomes that you've seen, with an understanding that it hasn't been tested under clinical trials, but that is distinct from the other things that we're talking about. So again, you're sort of like your maybe your technique, your theory of why it works, and again the anecdotes.
Yeah, the thing about, does it work is always a funny thing for me, in the sense of clearly something works. With the 10 people that we helped,
clearly something works some of the time.
Some of the time. Well, yep. It actually worked. We worked with 10, there's myself and 10 other people. And out of the 10 people that we worked with, all had incredible results. I would say at least everyone was at least, their Tourette's went down over 70%. The whole thing about, has it been tested? My response to that always is, what do you want to test, in the sense of the results are in front of you. When it's sort of like saying, we shot.
Hang on a second. I'm going to push back because I want to speak to that. You would do the tests, the types of tests that I'm talking about would be a double-blind test where you take a control group of people, or several, even better, several control groups of people that try other treatments, and you say, okay, well, what are the objective results that this group of people who had some treatment, treatment A, treatment B, treatment C, some that had no treatments,
understood,
and yours, and that's the kind of testing that not only am I proposing, I'm advocating for that, because from what I understand of the theory, which I'm hoping you'll explain a little better, or more in depth, is, and I believe we'll do a full episode on this at some point in time, but if just for a soundbite here, I'm interested. I do believe that this is something that is worthy of testing because of the potential impacts it could have.
Yeah, just to be very clear, when I say, it's always funny when someone says, has it been tested? It's just funny for me, because in the sense of, if you look at the videos, I had Tourette's, and now look at me now, on a podcast as I'm with you. Or, go watch the documentary, which people can see on YouTube for free now. It's called My Tourette's.
Have you watched it, Troy?
I have only watched the trailer for it, and have kind of skimmed through it, but I haven't watched it in all.
Yeah, please watch it. It's
I will. I'm intrigued by the possibilities.
But one, that's why that's always a little bit funny, but I'm with you completely. I would love to be able to do a double-blind study in all of that. Obviously, it's incredibly difficult now, if not almost impossible, because of what has happened to NXIVM and the way that our processes work. These are very skilled people working with people to have these philosophical explorations that help them, look at their Tourette's and things like that. So one day I would hope for that. What I can tell you just anecdotally is, after living with Tourette's for 20 years, being one of the most famous people in the country with Tourette's, the president of the Tourette Syndrome Association wrote a testimonial on the back of my book. Like, I lived, I was Tourette's, and it was part of my life, and had a severe case of it. I've tried all sorts of treatments, everything that you can imagine. And what I can tell you is, from everything that I've seen, nobody has results that come close to what we have done. It's unprecedented in the fact that we have, just through conversations and no medications, clearly something has had an effect on these people. Keith makes a joke. We have an interview online. He says, maybe we're just really good at picking out people and finding the exact moment where their Tourette's goes down 70%. So he's not even claiming that rational inquiry, which was the technology that he created, is responsible for those changes. I mean, I think that's how open he is, which is really which is what's neat about him. But clearly, there was something that we were doing with the tech that we had that was having a profound impact on these people's lives. And if every person we worked with, it helped them, and this was just through conversation. I don't know of anything in the world that comes close to those types of results, and it absolutely needs to have further investigation.
Well, when you say just conversation, I don't know that that's accurate, because there's the nature of the conversation is deeply emotional, as I would understand it. It's unpacking emotions.
Well, the reason I say just is just when you compare that to what is also out there for people in treatments. I mean, you have some people who are getting deep brain stimulation where they will crack open your skull, drill holes in your brain, and place electrodes into your brain and connect it to a pacemaker. So
right, but they can bill you for that, and there's an insurance memechanism. Right, it's like so.
No, but my point is,
but by contrast, not getting your skull cracked open is just conversation. Gotcha.
Or just medications, which I was on a lot, and the side effects can be horrific. Doesn't mean it can't help some people, but that's when I say just conversation. Yeah, it is definitely a guided conversation that takes skill, that was created by Keith. But to me, I would take that over anything that I've done in my life.
Was it created by Keith specifically for this application, or was it just something that already existed that was tailored to this?
The latter of what you said, yeah, is that he created the technology and the methodology, and what we did with the people with Tourette's was no different than the processes and courses that Eduardo took.
And my guess is, you since talked to the president of the Tourette's?
Yep.
And my guess is you're still in relative contact with the people who were in your initial test group.
When you say, oh yeah, I mean, in terms of the people who were in the movie and some of the Tourette, there's 10 people. I'm still in touch with about 5 or 6 of them. Almost all of them are incredibly grateful. And it's just been a wonderful journey with them. With the Tourette's, it's obviously, the whole Tourette's Association, it's been just a tough relationship, as you can imagine. And Keith says this in the documentary, is that when you start to get results like these just through conversations, it starts to raise a lot of questions. And he says in the movie, we're a society that doesn't like questions. We like answers. And so it starts to bring up a lot of fear, and rightfully so. And, when you have a whole industry that is based off that is deeply tied to the pharmaceuticals, you have a whole industry of neurology that's trying to study and find the genome of Tourette's. All of a sudden, if you have a different methodology through questions and exploration, that all of a sudden people are having profound changes, that can bring a lot of questions and a lot of fear. So it has not been the easiest thing for me.
So you said this, and I appreciate it. You're in touch with some of the people from that group, and most of them are incredibly grateful. Are there any of them that are saying, yeah, no, this didn't work, or B, it caused harm?
Yeah. So unfortunately, after we helped people, after the movie was made, after all the character assassination, all that stuff started to happen.
Sure.
Incredibly, 2 of the people who are actually in the movie are now claiming they're a part of the civil lawsuit, claiming that they were emotionally and psychologically abused. It is one of the most incredible, mind-blowing things in my life. That's why I encourage you to watch the movie. And I think they are representative of what so many people have done to NXIVM. They sort of now, although it was incredible at the time and they had a profound experience, and in this case beat Tourette syndrome, or their Tourette syndrome went down to such a degree it no longer limited them into their life. And then all of a sudden something is called a sex cult, and then they retroactively now think they were abused.
It's like every ex-girlfriend in history.
You know,
Like
Carissa, one of the
you're not supposed to say stuff like that. That is specifically what this podcast is for, is to say things that you're not supposed to say.
Gotcha.
one of the Carissa, when you watch the movie, you'll meet her. She made a statement on Nancy's sentencing, and she said that it didn't work, that it's bullshit. But during the video, she didn't tick once.
On the well, and I don't know, like the thing that would be interesting, and it's certainly something worth pointing out. But it doesn't necessarily. I don't know what her tick pattern was previously.
Even so, I think her ticks have gotten she started to tick more. But even if you look at where she's at now, relative to the moment before she ever had contact with us, it is.
She was making pig noises.
She was sleeping 12 to 13 hours a day. She had horrible Tourette's, and she has a very different life now. So anyways, that is the it's part of the sad stuff with this NXIVM, sort of the collateral damage that has happened, but it's not stopping me from moving forward and wanting to try to change this so we can help more people with Tourette's in the end of the day.
So what do you hope to accomplish with this talk next week?
For me, I think first and foremost, it's a personal thing about, being threatened by the prosecution and, taking steps in my life to not be in a place that I would, buckle in the face of that threat again. I think, prosecutors and that type of corruption, the FBI, they can only exist because we allow it to exist. And they're, they have a very loud voice, and they have guns, and they can throw people in jail. And so for me, I think it's about reclaiming that part of myself that was really afraid, and doing it because it's the right thing to do. And then I hope it then also, allows me to launch a new career in that way, again, of talking about character assassination and how we're treating people, and using my story with the Tourette syndrome and also what has happened with NXIVM to help wake people up to see what we're doing to each other.
And with that, I think I think that's probably a good breaking point for us. Thank you, Mark Elliott and Eduardo Asunsolo. And to our viewers, thanks a lot.
Thanks so much, Troy.
Thank you. Cut.
Yeah, hang on a second. I'm just going to put this up here as solo. That way,
For edit.
solo. That way, Val knows who to. She'll know that's where our edit is coming. Yeah, no, that was great. This everything we're doing now will all be off record. Mark, I hope you know this. You and I haven't spoken. Like I said, this will all be edited off.
Oh, no worries.
Hang on, actually, let me do this. I think I can stop.